the seat of representative government in this country. I don't look at it as a negative. It is a reality. And if we're going to have a debate, then maybe we should talk about the reality and the choices that have to be made to do that. And when we talk about gas regulation, Mr. Speaker, it's about pacing and understanding, indeed, where the measures are in place so Nova Scotians can appropriately deal with their affairs, doing it in a responsible manner, not having the day-to-day spikes that people were concerned about. Mr. Speaker, in doing it. But if we're going to sit in the House and start attacking what is legitimate affairs and business in one debate and go into another, then I think it's appropriate that we respond accordingly. But what I can say is that government has and will continue to adhere to is a responsible, balanced approach, a reasonable and reasoned one that will stand accountable and go to the people with any day, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Time allotted for debate on Resolution 2082 has now expired. The Chair now recognizes the Honourable the House Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, this concludes the Opposition Liberal Party business for today, and I'll turn it back to the Government House Leader.
Thank you. The Chair now recognizes the Honourable the Government Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I now do move that you rise and we move into Committee of the Whole House on Supply unto Her Majesty.
Thank you. The Chair now recognizes the Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gives me great pleasure to again have a few moments to talk about issues and goings-on in my community, the constituency I represent of Dartmouth North. Just the other day, Mr. Speaker, I was in my office, had the opportunity to spend some time going over some cases with my constituency assistant, and remarkably, Mr. Speaker, you know, both of us concurred how well connected the people are in the community of Dartmouth North. Considering that more than 60% of the community resides in apartment buildings where we know, Mr. Speaker, that you know, many people transition and transition out of our community, it's amazing to find out that when you walk down the street, you actually know an individual, you can acknowledge them and say hello. That there is a powerful thing of connection in our community. Mr. Speaker, we've witnessed that recently in the consultations that the Department of Education has put on, the Imagine Our Schools process. Again, we've seen the issue of school closures come up, and a community that came together, that put on several presentations to the school board, to explain and have their stories told as to how important the schools were in our community. An excellent opportunity for me as an elected official to consult with those constituents and to really see how vibrant and connected, again, the community is. Mr. Speaker, right now we have the great pleasure as a community to be partnered with the United Way program, a program that is centered around action for neighborhood change. In years past, the constituency of Halifax Atlantic had benefited from this program, and now Dartmouth North is going through those same motions. Tomorrow evening, I'm hoping to have the opportunity to attend the first public consultation, to hear and have the opportunity to address some of the constituents on issues of concern for them and the possible solutions that we can take as a community. And I want to thank the United Way for giving us that opportunity to help us become closer connected. And the big thing with this program, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that we want to engage people in our community. We want to get to know our neighbors. And it's very important in a community that only has 30% of individuals who actually own homes. And I say that because as a former apartment renter, it was difficult to get to know your neighbor. Chances are you might have known the person across the door, outside your doorway, or you might have met an individual in the laundry room. But, you know, in a lot of these buildings, there are many tenants that you don't get to see. And the benefits of having this program, Mr. Speaker, is that we do. We want to engage the community. We want to get people and allow them an opportunity to get to know one another, to have a better understanding. Currently, going back to the Imagine Our Schools process, I know I'm looking forward to having an opportunity with the Minister of Education to discuss some of the issues that we currently see in our school system on the Dartmouth side, the Dartmouth family of schools in particular. I know the Minister has toured Dartmouth High on a number of occasions. She's well aware of the issues there, the battles that the community has had over the years to have renovations. But in all truth, Mr. Speaker, we have an issue with a number of schools in the community of Dartmouth North. We recognize that we have some aging facilities, but still the teachers, the resource people, the community outreach people that work out of those schools, hopefully some guidance counselors at the elementary school age. I know the Minister had made mention of that in her opening. Hopefully, with their strength and the current government's support, we can refurbish those schools and bring them up to par. Mr. Speaker, the community of Dartmouth North is growing. It's absolutely amazing, and I can honestly say that a lot of the infrastructure that would have the community would have benefited from if we would have been successful with the Commonwealth Games bid. This community would have blossomed. However, we're not going to stand back. We're not going to let that block the road for us to completely develop our community. And we have a development right now taking place off of Windmill Road up on Trinity and Fernhill that will see 194 townhouses. Mr. Speaker, to me, I'm encouraged that we will have families coming into our community. We will have families that have ownership in our communities, not just renting apartments. That will benefit, and hopefully the Minister of Education will be well aware that we will need additional resources in our schools. Along with that development, there are 4 condominiums being developed as well, and that initially was a real issue. I know it's been an issue for our community in years past and continues to be. However, in meeting with the developer, he has decided to take 2 of those condominiums and design them for assisted living for seniors. So with that development, I'm even more encouraged now because we do have a shortage of affordable housing for seniors in our community. Mr. Speaker, we had an opportunity several months ago to have the Minister of Transportation over to address the Greater Burnside Business Association. And the Minister came over to talk to us about an issue that's been pressing the industrial park for a number of years, and that issue was the Burnside Expressway. And with the Premier's announcement in the throne speech back in the fall, we were very encouraged to have it made mention that the expressway was definitely going forward. And I know that the Minister took the opportunity to come over. He's been over on a number of occasions in Dartmouth North on issues with me, and I appreciate him taking the time to come over and to address some of the business owners in the Burnside Business Association. That is an important piece, as we know, to the success of the Gateway. And the communities, transportation, traffic, all those issues, that one piece, if we can put that in place over the next number of years, will be very crucial to us. Burnside's also seen some growth in the Dartmouth Crossing area, Mr. Speaker. Dartmouth Crossing, I know initially was a concern for a lot of people, a lot of businesses. You know, how was it going to affect their individual businesses? But it's become a retail center, and it's thriving, Mr. Speaker. It's where you have a number of businesses, and the ins and outs, the actual traffic flow in Burnside is being remedied by some successful decisions made by the municipality. It's not a juggernaut like going into Bayers Park, and that was very important for those businesses. Development, we talk about development, affordable housing. We have a huge opportunity. And like I said, with the Commonwealth Games bid, when we lost that, the community was very disappointed because we weren't going to receive that infrastructure. But we're not going to stop. Shannon Park, I'm hoping to hear by the end of this month, Mr. Speaker, that Canada Lands will actually obtain that land from National Defence, and we can go out to the public. And I'm very encouraged. I've met with Canada Lands on a number of occasions, and they've reassured me that that parcel of land will be developed in the best interest of the community. And that's very important because the way development takes place now is a developer will go out and actually work with the planning department. And they will make sure that everything is coordinated and fits with the MPS of the day. That being said, when it actually comes to the public, a decision is made, it's already made in the public's eye. We have our 5 minutes that we can express our concerns about the development, but we know the developer has been working. I'm encouraged with my talks with Canada Lands because they have said to the community they want to hear how the community wants Shannon Park developed, and that's very important. And we will draft up a list of 10 commandments, and then we will go to the developers, and the developers will have to develop something that the community wants. And Mr. Speaker, I've said on a number of occasions that Shannon Park, I believe, could be the jewel of this city if we develop right, if we have a portion of it being affordable. Dartmouth North is, as we know, not without its troubles. In 2006, the Premier had come up to our community, made an announcement about 250 police officers up on Ernest Avenue, and I raised a question. My first question in the House, Mr. Speaker, was to the Justice Minister as to how many officers we're going to see in the community of Dartmouth North. And I know it's a process. I know there's finances that are tagged along with that. And we heard today in the House that the Premier had stated that as of today, there's 150 officers on the street. That's part of the plan. But, Mr. Speaker, we still have an issue with crime. Violent crime. Just the other day, we had some shootings up on Brule Street. And when I speak with the local community constable, there's a frustration that they don't have enough resources to deal with the issue. And we have inmates housed in Burnside, and we know that there's a number of high-risk inmates that are going to come back out and come into our community. So I want to encourage the Premier to spread some of those resources and bring them back across to the very point where he did make that announcement in the community of Dartmouth North. And it's very important because the Pinecrest and Brule Street area is an area that's experiencing tremendous amounts of poverty and crime. Drugs, street crime, gun violence. It's a difficult area. So I want to encourage the Premier on that. Mr. Speaker, the housing situation in Dartmouth North, as I stated, there's a large portion of our community that doesn't have representation or home ownership. And that's key in connecting with your community and feeling obligated to become a part of your community. And currently, right now, we have one landlord from Toronto, Transglobe, that is pretty much dominated the market. And yes, they've come in, they've refurbished some of the buildings, they've done some exterior work, and they're trying to bring up the standard of housing. But along with this, they've also brought up the rents. And to be honest with you, Mr. Speaker, the individuals that reside in Dartmouth North, the other side of Albro, like the non-homeowners, are the ones that unfortunately are living in poverty and just can't afford that. And Mr. Speaker, you've heard me mention before in the House that a number of individuals that unfortunately have to seek assistance from the government through the Department of Community Services, they unfortunately don't have adequate shelter allowances. So when the landlord comes in, it doesn't really matter that the outside of the building is getting fixed up when they know that their rent is going to increase. So we need to take advantage of any potential development that we have in Dartmouth North to ensure that the community does benefit from a portion of it being affordable. And I know that there's individuals out there that will say, Shannon Park, we should open it up right now for housing. Well, for one, Mr. Speaker, we can't do that because those buildings should actually be condemned. There hasn't been heat on in a number of years, and I would not want to see a group of individuals who are marginalized put down in one area because it stigmatizes the community. And that leads me to my other frustration currently. We've seen the regional municipality come up with their 25-year plan, and I had participated in several of the focus groups before I entered into the political arena with great interest in what's going to actually happen to Dartmouth North. And one of the frustrations right now, and I know in Halifax Needham they're experiencing the same thing in and around the Uniacke Square area. We are two communities that are at risk of gentrification, Mr. Speaker. And the piece of the puzzle with the 25-year plan, the next step for HRM Council is to actually go out and engage communities. And it's a community visioning process. And they've done this in Fall River, and they've done this in Bedford and Musquodoboit. The frustration, though, Mr. Speaker, with my community, and I know several of the people in Halifax, Needham, who I met with 2 weeks ago on housing issues, is the fact that these are two communities that are at high risk of gentrification. These are two communities that should have automatically had the opportunity first to have that community visioning process put in place. And in a community that we well are aware of, the planning department is well aware that was planned wrong. Dartmouth North was not planned properly. It's not a healthy community. We should have been given that opportunity, and that frustration's there. But Mr. Speaker, again, I want to end by saying that I've enjoyed 2 years representing this community. It's amazing how connected we are, as I said, with so many people transitioning in and transitioning out. It's amazing that we have a connection, that I can walk down the street and I can know somebody on the street and say hello, and I take great comfort in that. If somebody walks into my office, my constituency assistant or myself, we know who they are. We know their family background. There are people that have lived in this community, have thrived in this community for 40, 50 years, Mr. Speaker, and I take great comfort in that. I know that the United Way has come to us because they realize we have organizations in place, we have community leaders in place that are willing to take on that challenge and get Dartmouth North onto that next step. And if we can get all the players, the different levels of government to come over and address some of the issues that we have, I know we will be successful. I'm confident that I will continue to represent this community, and I enjoy seeing individuals understand and take on a new challenge of responsibility, engaging their community, and actually having hope, Mr. Speaker. And I think that's been the piece that's been missing in Dartmouth North, is hope. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my seat and continue to represent this community.
Thank you. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand here in my place today and have 15 minutes to speak on what issue I'd like to speak on. Well, I want to keep speaking on the price of fuel and the price of energy today, Mr. Speaker, because I believe that's a very, very important issue, and I'm going to give you some examples. And there's been a lot of talk about our cars and our not having, being in hard shape to buy fuel, our consumers for their cars. But there's been not very much talk about our industries of Nova Scotia and the problems they are having. Today in debate over fuel prices and regulation, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia spoke something that I spoke to him earlier about, and that was problems with scallop industry in Digby, fishing industry. And Mr. Speaker, I don't like predicting catastrophes, but sometimes, because sometimes if you predict a catastrophe, you have to live through it twice. And but I'm telling you, there's going to be problems. There is problems right now in this province. I want to go to the scallop fleet in Digby. This scallop fleet is trying to earn a living by putting fuel aboard their boat, which is over $1 a liter right now, $1.10 a liter, whatever it is. These boats are going out fishing. One boat last week, I'll use one boat for an example. He went fishing last week for 4 days, fished night and day. A crew of 3 men aboard of it. They caught over $6,000 worth of scallops. They come in and settle up the end of that week after putting 98 hours in, or 96 hours, whatever it was, the 4 full days. 50% of that's taken for the boat. That's the upkeep of the boat. That's the way it's always been with the fleet of scallop fleet. The other 50% goes to the crew members, and they have to pay for their fuel, and they have to pay for their groceries to keep them fed out there for the 4-day trip. After they paid their fuel bill of $2,600 for 4 days fishing and paid their fuel bill, them crew members each had $90. after fishing for nearly 100 hours that week. Well, Mr. Speaker, they're slowly piling up in Digby, the scallop fleet is. Every week there's another one tied to the wharf, and the crews and the captains are headed west. And that's kind of ironic too, Mr. Speaker, because as the people head west to work in the oil fields, the higher the price goes again, because it's more money for more people, creating more demand on the money from the oil. So that's kind of a catch-22 situation, I guess. Then you got the groundfish fleet, groundfish draggers that are debating down there probably this afternoon, should I go out and try to catch my quota of fish? They're on a quota. Should I go out and try to catch that quota of fish, or should I wait to make sure if I can get that or not? Because to fuel them boats up, the fish draggers, you're talking $5,000 to $6,000, and they may be able to go out to get $10,000 or $11,000 worth of fish. In the same situation as the scallop boats. You got the lobster fleet. Right now with Southwest Nova, that lobster fleet should be fishing every day. Once May comes in, they fish every day. That fleet now has cut back to every other day, which is cutting the catch down because they're trying to do it to save fuel. They've laid one of their people off aboard that boat. That's what's going on in the fishing fleet here. It's going downhill. Nobody's saying a word about it. I hear it all the time down there. Why don't you say something about this? What can we do? What are we going to do? Good question. What are we going to do? You got the same thing in the trucking industry. We've got truckers down there. I know one fellow's got 3 trucks, pulling one off the road, going to try it with 2. I don't know what they're going to do. Their fuel bill's gone from $20,000 per year to $40,000 on the average. And this morning you hear about fuel going up, maybe going to be $200 a barrel in the next year and a half, maybe less. What's going to take place then? I don't know. I'm just asking these questions. I'm not sure, but I want to get to something in the end of this that maybe everybody should have heads up. In the papers this past week, we're hauling product around in these trucks that is costing more to deliver than what the product is worth. A loaf of bread now costs you more to get it to your home for the price of energy than it does to make the loaf of bread. Something wrong with that one, that's for sure. And then it's going to double again the next year. People on fixed incomes that can't pay their grocery bills now. Companies that can't charge the consumer anymore because the money isn't there to charge it. Somewhere, Mr. Speaker, there's a breaking point. There's got to be a breaking point to this somewhere. Now, I'm not sure where. I'm hoping that somebody can come up with some answers. I want to touch on the farmers, too. Farmers, another high-volume fuel user. They're running trucks, they're running tractors, they're running machinery to get the fields planted so they can grow food for us to eat. And they're going to be in trouble. They're in trouble now, some of them, because some of the boats, too, are in trouble because the fuel companies, the local fuel companies, are afraid now to get down and fill them boats up. They used to get down and fill them up. They used to come fill the farmers' tanks up full of fuel. But now they're saying, I had a hard job to get last week's pay out of him. Am I going to get next week's pay for that oil? That's going on in the industries of Nova Scotia. And we got tourism coming on. Speaker, we got tourism. We've got boat tour operators. We got bus tour operators. They're not sure just if they can raise their price a hair more or not, because they're afraid the tourism, by all that's being told and all the speculation, that tourism is going to be down. So they don't know whether they dare to raise the price anymore for their tours to make a go of it. I hear that every day down there in western Nova Scotia. A lot of tour operators and they're very concerned about the price of fuel. Already, there's 70% of the people in this province is saying that the price of fuel is going to change their plans from vacationing this summer. I mean, a lot of it's not going to bother. As long as you got a nice paycheck coming in every week, you know, most of us probably do in this room, we can afford a tank of gas right now. I'm talking about industry here, industry that's going to run. Maybe when you get to White Point Beach, there may not be a tour there to go anywhere. I'm not sure. So you may not want to go again. Mr. Speaker, oil, like I said, is $122 a barrel, and it's going to rise to $200 prediction. Now that's being said on the radio, and again, I don't know really the answer to it. The only thing I can say is to beware. The investors of the world investing into oil, beware. Government, beware. Because I'm going to tell you why. I have a document here that I want everybody to read. I want everybody to read this because it'll open up your eyes. And probably you've read the story about the Great Depression. Not a story, the truth. And there's a document here that I'm going to table in the end, and I want you all to read it. But I want to read you one little thing out of it. The Great Depression was a dramatic worldwide economic downturn beginning in some countries as early as 1928. The beginning of the Great Depression in the United States is associated with the stock market crash of October of '29, known as Black Tuesday. The Depression had devastating effects in both the industrialized countries and those which exported raw material. International trade declined sharply, as did personal incomes, tax revenue, prices, and profits. Cities all around the world were hit hard, especially those dependent on industry. Construction was virtually halted in many countries. Farming, rural areas suffered as crop prices fell as high as 50%. Facing plummeting demand with a few alternate sources of jobs, area dependent on primary sector industries such as farming, mining, and logging suffered the most. Mr. Speaker, Franklin Roosevelt's chairman of the Federal Reserve from 1934 to 48 stated what he believed caused the Depression. As mass production has to be accompanied by mass consumption in turn implies a distribution of wealth. Not existing wealth, but wealth as it is currently produced, to provide people with buying power equal to the amount of goods and services offered by the nation's economy machinery. Instead of achieving that kind of distribution, a giant suction pump had by 1929 drawn into the few hands an increasing portion of currently produced wealth. This serviced them as capital accumulation, but by taking purchasing power out of the hands of mass consumers, the savers denied to themselves the kind of effective demand for those products that would justify reinvestment of their capital accumulations into new plants. In consequence, as in a poker game, when the chips were concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, the other fellers could stay in the game only by borrowing. When the credit ran out, the game stopped. Mr. Speaker, the average Canadian debt in Canada is $80,000. 50% of those people are in a financial disaster mode and only 3 paychecks away. That's what kind of shape this country's in, Mr. Speaker, and that is what's going on. Listen, I'm not trying to scare people. I'm not trying to scare people. My belief is you prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And something, Mr. Speaker, that I would like to close with and it's true, money is like manure. If it stays in a pile, it's a pile of manure. If you spread it around, it makes things grow. Mr. Speaker, what's going on in this world now is being piled in a pile. And if it keeps piling in a pile, we are in trouble. And I will table this document for all to read, and I hope you do, because I believe we can find the answer. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll take my seat. Thank you very much.
Oscar Davis. Oscar Davis.
Thank you. The motion before the House is carried. Please, the Committee on Supply will now be called to order. The Chair now recognizes the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you please call the estimates for Resolution E4? Department of
Resolution
Education.
E4 will continue with the estimates for the Department of Education. The Chair now recognizes the honourable member from Halifax Sedell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I welcome the minister back for a second round in the hot seat. I will confine my remarks largely today to post-secondary education. But before I do, I would like to thank the minister for her help and cooperation in the past year since we last had this. And I know that anytime I've contacted her department, especially her deputy and Kevin Chapman in particular, I've found the help to be very efficient and thoughtful and prompt, and I appreciate that. And I've heard that from students as well. So I appreciate the minister's help and the help of her staff over the past year. I also know that she's going through some difficult times at the moment, and I'm glad to admire her fortitude and persevering here. And I wish her all good things and for her family in the coming days. I wanted to begin just with a brief statement on post-secondary education. These are challenging times for post-secondary education, as the minister knows. Times of great opportunity as well. We happen to be living in a knowledge economy where productivity and innovation are at a premium, where post-secondary education is considered an essential need. And it just so happens that in this time when education is so highly sought after and so highly regarded, that we have this successful industry here in Nova Scotia that leads the world in many ways. And so we have this successful industry in a time that puts a premium on post-secondary education. Apart from the billions of dollars that post-secondary education brings to our economy, it has other socioeconomic benefits in terms of addressing equality issues, questions of access, and questions of opportunity. And so we have this great valuable resource. Really, in fact, apart from our institution, the most valuable resource we have are our people, the people who teach, the staff, the students at our universities that have helped create this billion-dollar industry for us here in Nova Scotia. And at the same time, this industry is being challenged. That we have challenges of declining access as post-secondary education becomes more important. We have a decline in skilled workers as people leave the province or as the demand for skilled workers increases. We have a decline in enrollment because of the demographic challenge and because of outmigration. We have a problem in the challenge of an aging population, sometimes even an opportunity for post-secondary education. We have the possibility on the horizon of changes in the equalization formula. We have competition from out-of-province universities and foreign universities. We have an aging infrastructure. So we have this great opportunity, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, but we also have these great challenges. And I know that the students, the Alliance of Nova Scotia Student Associations in particular, have been calling for a comprehensive review of post-secondary education. And perhaps the time is right, given these challenges and given these opportunities, for us to review post-secondary education. And I wanted to say something in general about the principles that might guide this comprehensive review, Mr. Chair, in large part because I think it'll set the frame our questions here today from the official opposition and our comments and our general approach to post-secondary education. And these, I think, are the principles that ought to guide post-secondary education, the determination of making of decisions and allocations relating to post-secondary education. I start with accessibility, Mr. Chair. Accessibility to us means that every qualified student, every student who's qualified and has a desire to study at our universities and colleges, that those students will not be prevented, especially those who need it, that those will not be prevented from going to universities or colleges for financial reasons. I know the minister shares these objectives, but I want to make it clear that that is one of the things that drives our approach to post-secondary education and funding, that access is important, especially given what we've said earlier about the need for an education in this knowledge-based economy. That it has to be comprehensive, that we have to have a full range of institutions that are available at universities, colleges, and career colleges, and other avenues for teaching and learning. That there has to be a better integration of colleges and universities and our post-secondary institutions, so that there's a little bit more movement, that we can reduce barriers to students who are trying to move between colleges and universities. And we also have to have freedom of movement within the country, that there should be non-discrimination against out-of-province students in their eligibility for bursaries and tax credits. And we believe that there should be stability of funding and predictability in granting of monies to universities and institutions, and that there should be fairness in the funding programs between universities, between undergraduate universities and graduate universities and programs, and that there should be accountability and transparency. We should know where the money is coming from and where it's going, and that there should be flexibility and innovation in our post-secondary institutions so they can respond immediately to challenges and opportunities as they come up. So if we are to have a comprehensive review of post-secondary education, Mr. Chair, we would like to see these principles used as guiding principles in the determination of decisions and the allocation of funding relating to post-secondary education. And we do need a comprehensive review of post-secondary education at some time. I should start, if I may, by just referring to the minister when she introduced the student leaders from the Alliance of Nova Scotia Student Associations. I took note of the fact that she said that these students, and have worked with her and have worked with me as well, and they will continue to work with us on a comprehensive review of post-secondary education. I wonder if that was just a spur-of-the-moment introduction, or is the minister really signaling that there will be a comprehensive review of post-secondary education, or that she is contemplating a review of post-secondary education? So maybe I'll just start off with that question.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Parish was there. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the member opposite, to thank you for leading us into discussion, debate, and questions on post-secondary education. And I would just like to begin perhaps by responding to your question with respect to students and a composite post-secondary education review. And the comment that I made was made, I believe, on the day that the students made their announcement about their plan or parish, I think was the language they used. But I want to go back to my involvement with the students from the both student unions, and I believe that has been a positive relationship, and I believe that's translated into me and my department and this government listening to the students, and by listening to them, that has translated into some benefits that students will enjoy, have started to enjoy, and will continue to enjoy. So I speak very favorably and very fondly about the student members in both student unions. And when we were talking 2 years ago with students, I remember meeting with them and having lunch with them, and one of the things then at that time that was of concern to them had to do with student assistance. And so it was at that time that we agreed that we needed to look at the way we provide assistance and support to university students. And thus we did our internal review of the different programs that we have for students, and also that translated into the review that took place across the province. And so the students were very much instrumental in working with me to make sure that that review took place, and they gave me, I guess, some credit in that we would listen at the department to the responses that were heard around the province and respond accordingly, which we did. So when they came back and talked about how pleased they were with the results of that, and then where we go from here, they talked about that overall comprehensive review of post-secondary education across the province, going beyond just the one component of student assistance, but a comprehensive review. And they held their press conference, and my comments were made at that time, Mr. Chair, that we supported a comprehensive review and would be working with the students as that review unfolded. And I believe their timeline was to look at something in the fall of '08, so we'll be back at the table with them to talk about when and how that review unfolds. It's certainly a review that I believe is long overdue, and in fact, 2 years ago when I was first in the portfolio and talking about universities, I made the comment, some in the media described it as provocative musings, but it simply was a question: do we have too many universities? And I didn't have the answer, but I posed the question. And that statement, I think, was a good beginning, because as a result of that, I initiated meetings with the presidents of the universities on an individual basis. They came into my office, and I asked them to focus on three things. One was the history of their university, and that was for my information. Another was the challenges that they saw in their university at this point in time. And the third was possible solutions. And so we had some very healthy, informal discussions about where we are as a province, where they are as a university, and where we go from here. So it's quite appropriate that we would formalize that review, and that's what I believe the students are wanting starting in the fall, and that's something that, as the Minister, I'll be prepared to work with them on that review.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Well, I thank the Minister for her response, but just to be clear, to know what we've just heard, is the Minister saying that she is willing to embark on a comprehensive review and will start with the question she asked earlier about whether or not there were too many universities in Nova Scotia? Because I don't recall that being part of the terms of reference that the students had set out, and I think the principles that I outlined here earlier really relates to what the Alliance of Nova Scotia Students Associations was saying, and the Canadian Federation of Students as well were endorsing that and talking about the many principles. So just to be clear, is the Minister saying that she is ready to embark on a review of whether there are too many universities in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess to be clear, the number of universities is one small part of a comprehensive review, and I expect when the terms of reference are communicated and when we begin the process, that will be one of many things that's under review and that's discussed and needs to be looked at. But as I said, it's one of many.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go through some of the items mentioned in the budget, or identified in the budget, relating to post-secondary education, mostly by way of getting some clarification. And I want to start with the freeze on tuitions. Of course, as you know, we on this side of the House have been calling for a freeze for a long time, really over the objections of the government side and a denial from the government side that something like that was even possible. So I'm delighted that the Minister has embraced this idea of a freeze as one way of addressing the challenge of access in post-secondary education. Now, some of the students groups have raised an objection or a question really calling for clarification, and they're wondering whether or not what we're looking at here, as it's outlined in the MOU and in the budget, is really more of a rebate rather than a reduction in tuition, and that this is not really a freeze in tuition, or if it is, really is a freeze for 3 years, and there's no preparation made for beyond 3 years. And I'm wondering whether or not the minister has any statement on whether or not it's a rebate or a reduction, and what her plans are for beyond 3 years.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm glad to be able to speak to the MOU because we have just finished the third year of a 3-year MOU, which certainly gave stability to the universities. Their funding was stable and predictable, and that allowed them to do their planning. In the last year of that MOU, where the tuition increase was to be 3.9, we were able to freeze that so there would be no increase for the university students. Working through the MOU proved to be a good experience. It proved to be a good document. It brought the university presidents together. We had representation from the students at the table to discuss and develop an MOU, and it was an excellent process. And what it did was translate into a second MOU of 3 years. So with the freeze in the last year of the previous MOU and the freeze in the upcoming 3 years, that will give a freeze on tuition to students in Nova Scotia for 4 years, 4 consecutive years. And you know, the terms freezing tuition or looking at affordability of universities are terms that are kind of used loosely, I would say, because we know that the tuitions at universities are set by the Board of Governors, and tuition depends on the program. And so we did not go into universities and ask them to change their
The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. Just for a moment. I know we've got to keep quorum in here. I appreciate there's some levity in occasions, and I obviously participated in it on many occasions. But I'd like to have the noise down a little bit so we could hear the minister's answers, if you don't mind.
Thank you. We'll recognize, I can hear the Minister quite well, but I understand your point. Minister of Education, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was speaking about the confusion between freezing tuition and making tuition more affordable. And Board of Governors at the universities, as the member opposite would know, are the people who set the tuition rates for their universities. And so we did not go in and ask universities to change the tuition that they're charging, but what we did do was put in place an agreement that would allow university students to have access to dollars that would help them address the tuition fees that were being charged. So it's in practice, it is reducing the amount of money that a student has to pay in order to cover the tuition costs at their universities.
The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the minister has clarified this issue elsewhere, but when she says students in Nova Scotia, she really means students from Nova Scotia, because we know that there are students who are not covered. And even though this new MOU is a little different, the previous MOU did allow tuition fees to rise, and perhaps it's debatable in the department's mind, but you know, ancillary and auxiliary fees were also allowed to rise, and I'll talk about that a little later. I did have a question about the bursary trust. You know, this is another $66 million trust, and I'm wondering why put the money in a trust and not put it in a vehicle that's more accountable and that's more you know, an end of the year money as well. That's something that this House and this legislature can examine and hold up to a higher level of scrutiny.
The Honourable Member, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions there, or a couple of comments I think that I should make. Number one is the 3.9% was the maximum to which tuitions could have been increased in the last MOU. and the money that we've put into the MOU this year freezes the tuition for the next 3 years. So we address that, so there will be no increase to students for tuition. The second thing is why the trust for the bursary. And that trust is managed by the university presidents. It's arm's length from us. And we believe that that will allow that trust to be managed. We have confidence in the university presidents who will be managing that. And we also recognize that this is, again, one way that we can say to the university students in this province that we want to try to help them make that university education more affordable. So it is arm's length, it's managed by the university presidents, and we believe it will be administered effectively.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question relating to the trust and out-of-province students. As I said earlier, this has been a continuing problem with the MOU and with the trust, and we have the same problem presented, with the initiative in the budget. Out-of-province students will not receive it, or at least will not receive it until 2010, and will really, by university expense standards, will receive a pittance. My concern is that we have this very successful industry, where students come from all over the world to study here, and they bring with them resources that they use for accommodation and to support themselves and for entertainment. So they bring with them an awful lot of money to our province. And we wouldn't treat any other industry that way. This is a very successful industry, and yet here we are in this bursary saying to them, we're going to treat you as second-class citizens. We're not going to welcome you here. And for the little amount of money that we will save by excluding them, I'm wondering if we will turn off more students and force them to go to other universities. As you know, we have a real challenge from Memorial University at the moment, and McGill and Alberta. And I'm wondering if this just exacerbates that problem.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I certainly would want to share the member opposite's feelings about how important it is to our Nova Scotia economy and to our universities to have students from out of province. And we have about 31% of the students in our universities who are from out of province. And they're valued, they contribute a lot to the university life and to the community life. And a survey was done in 2005 to track the students who graduated in 2003. And the graduates at that time from out of province who were here in Nova Scotia, 21% of them had stayed in Nova Scotia. So we recognize and embrace those students. When I was meeting with students about funding and Nova Scotia students and Nova Scotia universities and so on, I asked them the question, how did they think the funding should be allocated? And, there were different opinions, there were different thoughts there, Mr. Chair, but one student, I will remember clearly, one student from out of province said to me, he said, I think you should look after Nova Scotia students first. Now, this is a student from outside the province. This is a student who knew what the tuition would be in Nova Scotia when he came here, and he still made the decision to come. And I think that sends a very strong message about the quality of education programming that we have here, and that universities in Nova Scotia are recognized all across Canada as having high standards, top quality education. So I'd like to think that students are attracted here because of that. I do also, though, want them to understand that we appreciate them being here. And one of the things that we have explained is that the funding that comes to this province from the federal government is on a per capita basis. So, Mr. Chair, the funding that follows the students to Alberta, Ontario, or wherever stays in that province. If they choose to come to Nova Scotia to study, that money does not come with them. And personally, I believe that's wrong. One of the things I've said to the students and have agreed to do with them is to continue to lobby the federal government for some recognition, because 31% of our student population is a significant number. And if we had the funding that went with those 31%, it would certainly be a boost to our universities. So that's a battle that I will continue, and I will continue it with the students, because we need to make sure that, that we can convince the federal government of the importance of that to the students and to this province. Recognizing that, our government made the decision that the priority would be our Nova Scotia students, and I'm very proud to say that. However, we recognized that the gap between what our Nova Scotia students would pay and what students from outside the province would pay was one that we wanted to control as best we could. So in the third year of our bursary, we will be giving a bursary to students from outside of the province to maintain that gap at $1,000 differential. So we are trying to control that, but we are recognizing that we are investing taxpayers' dollars in Nova Scotia in students from Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, we too believe that Nova Scotia students are important, but we also believe that our post-secondary institutions are so important to the economy of Nova Scotia. And there are other benefits from it as well, not to mention immigration from the number of students who come from other parts of the country and from other parts of the world and end up staying here. So there are an awful lot of other benefits that come, and we should recognize that, and the fact that this 31% of the population that comes here is also a tremendous asset and a tremendous, offers tremendous potential for us, not just in terms of education, but in terms of other socioeconomic benefits. I want to ask about direct lend. The move to direct lend is again something that we had called for and that we had negotiated in a previous agreement, and I think it's a smart move. It reduces the interest rate for students, and it essentially gives them more opportunity to borrow, I suppose. It's not something that we want to encourage, but at least if they are going to borrow, it gives them better rates. Just a question, who will be the carrier? Who will be the manager for this direct lend initiative?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, direct lend is one of the many programs of assistance that we have for post-secondary students, and it's one that just as recently as today I was hearing from one of the pages talking about how important this particular initiative is. And we recognized that students, if they were getting their loan, it was going through with a bank and they were being charged a rate higher than we thought we could provide it for them. So contracted a company called Resolve to do the managing for that. And the agreement that we have is that students will pay prime plus 0.5 as a floating rate, or prime plus 3 as a fixed rate. And we also, when we made that announcement, that's effective August 1? August 1. And we also made the commitment that any savings or efficiencies rather than savings, any efficiencies that are generated through that will go back into student assistance initiatives that we currently have, because we are not interested in generating any revenue on the backs of the students. We're interested in providing a loan that is easier for them to repay because it has a lower interest rate, and reinvest any efficiencies, as I said, into other student assistance programs.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Minister, I was in Ottawa in March to talk about student loans, and I had mentioned to someone there about direct lend, and they said, don't go to Resolve. They said, we've had a horrible time with Resolve here in Ottawa, and I consulted with student groups here, and they said they had the same problem. They said that this company really doesn't have a great reputation in the student loans field, and I'm wondering what kind of, was this bid put out to tender? Was there other, was there a review done of the qualification? Were there criteria set out before a Resolve was given the contract to manage direct lend?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. To the members. Yeah. Well, dream on. Okay.
Soon enough. Soon enough, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a tender called for the management of the direct lend, and the successful applicant was Resolve, well known across Canada, and reputable. And we were happy to have them respond and to take on that responsibility. So it certainly didn't. It wasn't a company that wasn't well known, good reputation, and it was the response to our tender.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about the non-repayable grant. Again, I think I would thank the minister for responding in part to our call and the call of students to establish a needs-based grants program. We're not quite there yet, and as you know, Mr. Chair, the loan, this program, the non-repayable loan, essentially addresses 20% of the student loan, provides a rebate in a way of 20% of the student loan, but only 40% of a typical student's loan is, it comes from the provincial, from the Nova Scotia program. That 60% of that loan is not covered. So it is a step in the right direction, and it is a small step. And perhaps there was a difference of opinion we've had over the last couple of years about what a needs-based grants program means. But to be charitable, I think what this points to is the need to reform our student loans process itself, so that we look at targeted constituencies and targeted groups and targeted needs. And I'm thinking here principally about students from rural Nova Scotia, students who come from single-parent families, students who come from low-income families, students from whose parents have not gone to university before. There are a whole range of students, as the minister knows, we've talked about this over the last couple of years, where 40% of our students who are qualified don't go to university or college because of that. And I'm hoping that this will be a step that will lead us in that direction to a much more targeted needs-based grants program that takes into account academic merit, but also fine-tunes it and reforms the student loan system so it makes university more accessible to these 40% of students who don't go there. Thank you.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I share the member's concern and desire, I guess, to have the federal government follow suit with the needs-based grant. It is 20% of the Nova Scotia student loan, and it would be, I think, very positive move and very encouraging if the federal government would follow that, but that's their decision, unfortunately not ours. However, one of the things that students said to us when every time I've been talking with them is it would be better if the money that we have to support them in their education could be delivered up front. And that's what caused us to, in that internal review I spoke of, where we looked at all of our student assistance programs, and there was one program that we felt was very underutilized. That was the debt reduction, which was after graduation, students would make application. And we found that not a lot of students were taking advantage of that. We had about $8 million that was available through that. So our decision was, knowing that upfront needs-based grants would be important to students, it would allow students access to university, students who may not otherwise be able to go. So we redirected that money from the debt reduction after graduation to the needs-based upfront grant. And the member mentions other groups, and when you look through the whole menu of student assistance programs that we have programs, we have assistance above the needs-based assistance program for low income, for students with dependents, for students with disabilities, for part-time students. So there are a number of ways that we have identified dollars that will help and will support and provide greater access to a greater number of students in need in this province.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the Minister for her response. And I do appreciate her clarifying the question about where the money comes from, because a lot of this money, and rightly so, is a reshuffling of money from other programs that were not really being subscribed to. And I do want to follow up on that to say that the fact that there are so many programs is not necessarily a good thing, because these programs are often very hard to reach. They're inaccessible to a lot of students. And often, I think we can see in the budget documents as well that there are programs where the money is not spent from year to year, and then it's rolled over into general revenues and to other programs. And I'm thinking in particular, although this is not in the Minister's area of responsibility, I know the Employment Support and Income Assistance Program, which was designed to support precisely this type of student, and yet we've only had a take-up of 2 or 3 students. And it's just extraordinary that we have these programs ostensibly designed to make university and college more accessible, and yet they seem to provide more barriers. And I'm thinking the Employment Support and Income Assistance Program, Regulation 67 in particular, seems anti-university, it's anti-college. And I would certainly encourage the Minister to use her good offices to try and change this program so it does become more accessible to single parents and people on low income. I'd like to ask a question also about the federal government and the whole question of integrating and harmonizing to a certain extent our programs. Many students complain about the lack of consistency, the amount of paperwork, the number of times documents are lost. And I know the Minister, when I asked her this question last year, said that she would embark on a full consultation, I believe was the phrase she used, with her federal counterparts. And at the time, the federal government was engaged in a review of its loans process. And I'm wondering whether or not the Minister will share with us any document that was submitted to the reviews, precisely what position the government of Nova Scotia took at that time and what the response was from the federal government.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you. We did have discussions, the member opposite and my department have had discussions with streamlining the process. We want to make sure that students, A, know that the funds are available, and B, can access them easily. And one of the challenges within the department is to make sure that students can speak with someone at my department who can help them navigate the system, so to speak. And we're trying to make sure that that is easier and less of a burden for students. And so, I think if you talk to the staff in my department, you would realize that I have been at them fairly constantly about recognizing that we need to facilitate that process and speed things along. With respect to where we are with the federal government, ongoing dialogue between my office, my deputy, and the folks in the federal government, encouraging them, I guess you could say, to follow some of the practices that we have, and trying again to make that not 2 separate applications, but something that if they qualify for one, they automatically qualify for the other. So, any correspondence, if that would be of assistance to the member, to let him know and have confidence that we are doing that, we would be glad to provide that.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, and I know in my opening remarks I said I appreciated very much the help of the staff, particularly Kevin Chapman, who seems to deal with most of these questions and helping people navigate. The problem isn't with the navigation. The problem is in the criteria that's set out for students and their ability to access it, and the paperwork that's required of these students and potential applicants. I wanted to move on to talk about another item in the budget, and that relates to the increased loans to students, medical, dental, and law students. As the minister knows, we've talked about this in the past. You know, the debt of these students, particularly medical students, runs now at an average of about $100,000. And I'm not sure how allowing them to borrow $5,655 more this year helps them to become, helps make these programs more accessible to them. And I refer here to an editorial in the Herald from May the 5th, if I may, Mr. Chair, that talks about attracting doctors, particularly to rural Nova Scotia. And it cites a national physician survey released last week that says high tuition costs are a major factor in determining whether otherwise highly qualified students enter medical school. More than 1/3 of those replying to the 2007 questionnaire were expecting their debt load from going to medical school to exceed $80,000. And the study says that these students decided not to go to medical school, and also says that these students were principally from rural Nova Scotia. They were Aboriginal students. They were low-income students. And so the editorial says these findings raise concerns over whether some students simply can't afford to train to become doctors, especially those from families in rural parts of Canada or from Aboriginal communities, thus making it even more problematic to recruit doctors to those areas. And I'm wondering what the department can do beyond adding to the debt burden of medical students.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the question of medical students obviously was on the floor of the House today with the announcement from our Minister of Health. And I think we all recognize that there is a need to have more doctors in our province. We have a facility here that can train doctors, and we have students in Nova Scotia who want to take their training in medicine here, and they want to stay here. And when we were looking at how can we help them, we had representation from med students come in and meet. And some of those representatives were from rural Nova Scotia, and they wanted to practice in rural Nova Scotia. So we believe that we were hearing from the people who would be most impacted by any change or any decision that we made. And so one of the two things that we've done to help students who are studying medicine, law, or dentistry, one of them is for their payment deferral when they are going into internship, when they're articling, which is really considered a part of their study. That normally they would be expected to start paying their loan once they stopped studying and started earning. And so what we said was, we will make a change there, so you can defer payment on your loan during that period of articling or, as I said, residency. And so during that time, they don't have to pay anything back on their loan, and we pick up the interest. And that was something that they agreed to, that they thought would be of great benefit to them when they looked at that being a major part of their study rather than the beginning of their employment, which is really the way it was interpreted. So we made that change. The second thing we did, again with needs, and if students are in need of a student loan and they're in medicine, law, or dentistry, we know that the costs of those programs is high. So we increased the amount of borrowing capacity that they would have, recognizing, as I said, that they would have higher costs. And one of the things that we learned when we were talking to those med students, and it's something that I'm sure everybody in this House would agree, these students who become the doctors of our province want very much to pay back any money they've borrowed, and they will have the ability to do that once they get established. And so there's never a question of not being able to pay back. But what we wanted to make sure was we did not expect them to pay back until they were well established and they were ready. So we worked it out with the med students. They were happy with that. We believe both of those programs help them to some degree. And as I said, the announcement this morning about support for extra seats for med students in rural Nova Scotia, I think is all going in the right direction, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the minister for drawing attention to my private member's bill on medical students, which in fact the government was kind enough and wise enough to call and implement. I think allowing them the interest deferral was a good move, and I was happy to be a part of that process. I want to say something about ask about the Nova Scotia Community College as well. I think the Nova Scotia Community College is one of our great success stories. I had talked about declining enrollments before. This is certainly not true of the community college. And I've met Joan MacArthur-Blair, the president, several times now, and I must say I've been very impressed with the energy and the passion and the vision that she brings to her position as the president of the Nova Scotia Community College. And I think there are a lot of great things happening there. And particularly, I visited the campus on the other side of the harbor, and it is certainly impressive. I think great things are happening at the community college. I'm wondering whether or not the minister has any plans or has any hope of extending this college system to other parts of Nova Scotia. And I'm thinking here principally of Sydney. It seems to me that's what's happening across in Dartmouth and what's happening in the HRM could certainly be replicated in Sydney. Cape Breton could use an institution, well, it has an institution like the Nova Scotia Community College, but expanding it so that it can do something to help the local economy there, to help develop more skilled workers, perhaps in the offshore, which is developing as well, and maybe even help bring some Nova Scotians back from other parts.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm pleased to be able to comment on the community college system that we have in this province. And just a little bit of the history of that. Of course, we know that some of us remember when there were vocational schools in the province and the important need that those vocational schools met as students went through high school or sometimes even junior high and then into vocational school. And we also remember the sad day when those vocational schools closed because it left a void. We seem to have a number of years where we had a population that, in my opinion, we did not serve well. A number of students who are interested and inclined to move into the trades, good occupations, and we need them in this province. And we did not seem to have a mechanism for that to happen easily. So when the community college started to evolve, it certainly picked up and provided a help to close that gap. And it is a system that covers all of rural Nova Scotia. We have 13 sites around the province, and the renovations and capital dollars that we have allocated to the community college system have brought renovations to many of those rural campuses. So we do recognize they're part of a system. We do recognize the importance that they are in the communities out in rural Nova Scotia. The other thing that we're doing with respect to those campuses is when we are increasing the number of seats and looking at programs that we can provide for students, we look at the local needs. And I'll give you an example. When we announced the long-term care beds, the first question was, how do we staff them? How do we train people to go into those long-term care beds as workers? And recognized the community college stepped up to the plate and said, you know, we'll look at putting programs on in rural communities, and they've responded very timely to any of those requests that we have made. So we are continuing to build and grow and support all of the sites, all in rural Nova Scotia. We, you know, have a very modern building across the harbor, and phase 2 of that, we've turned the sod on that. So I think that the need that is being met through that system is important to the economy of this province. We recognize that we do not have the trades, skilled trades workers that we need in this province, and the community college will customize a program. They will help employers. They will provide the trades training that we need so our young people can fill those important jobs in this province. So we're proud of that system, very proud of it, and proud that it is a rural system. It's not just a metro program.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Yes, definitely, Mr. Speaker. There's no doubt at all that the Nova Scotia Community College system represents a great opportunity and great potential for many parts of the province, especially in rural Nova Scotia, and particularly in providing and meeting the needs of communities that need more skilled workers. But my question was much more specific, and that was whether or not there is any possibility of expanding and developing the community college system in Sydney. I do want to move on from budgetary items to talking about the MOU, although I know there is a great deal of overlap between the two. I wanted to talk specifically about infrastructure. But the budget document refers to the Crown share, of course, and that universities have been pushing hard for infrastructure money, and we believe that that money would come out, that would be really available or made available in the MOU. But it's not. It's in a side agreement, and I'm wondering about the wisdom of using money that we don't have, the Crown share, for example. I'm wondering about the wisdom of just dumping money at the end of the year, when really we need a stream of money over the years so that universities can deal with the infrastructure issue. And I wonder about the rationale for using the Crown share in that way. Not to say that infrastructure is not important, but we wanted universities to have some stability in their infrastructure money, and this doesn't seem to present it here.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, infrastructure all across this province is an issue. It's something that universities have brought to our attention, and deferred maintenance or infrastructure needs do exist. And when we meet, and we do meet regularly with Concept, the university presidents, that's certainly something that they identify. And most universities have a lot of fundraising campaigns, capital campaigns, and that delivers a lot, millions of dollars, in fact, to universities for new buildings, but very rarely does that translate into renovations or infrastructure dollars. And so they're left with a need. And we recognize that. And when we were looking at how we might address that, the university presidents were quite agreeable to establishing the trust fund. They recognized that as a positive step, that we as a government recognized the position they were in, and we wanted to make sure that we had some dollars allocated to that fund that would be theirs to draw upon and help begin that infrastructure rebuilding.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to draw the minister's attention to clause 17B in the MOU, and just ask for her interpretation of it. It says, to this end, the parties commit to annual meetings during the life of this agreement that facilitate identifying, and this is the part that I would like some clarification on, a combination of funding mechanisms, that's a combination of funding mechanisms that will provide $25 million of infrastructure funds over the 3-year period of this MOU. The concern is that the combination of funding mechanisms refer to raising tuition fees and raising ancillary or auxiliary fees if the Crown share does not yield the maximum $25 million that universities are allowed. In other words, the minister is assuming that there would be $250 million in the Crown share forthcoming, and that 10% of that will be $25 million. And I'm wondering if that combination of funding mechanisms means that the universities will be allowed to raise tuition fees and ancillary or auxiliary fees during the life of the agreement if the Crown share does not yield $25 million.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, and to the member, thanks for the question, and I'm glad to provide the clarification for that. As I said, the university presidents were certainly in agreement with establishing the trust and fully understood that funding mechanisms would not include increases in tuition or ancillary fees. It was very clear that that was not part of that combination of funding mechanisms. But we're talking about things like if the universities wanted to bring money to the table, if they wanted to borrow money, and if they wanted to have fundraising, if they wanted to look at any other ways that they could bring money to add to the money that was in the trust fund. But it was clearly understood it was not on the back of students.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Well, I thank the minister for her clarification. I understand then that the combination of funding mechanisms will not include tuition increases or ancillary and auxiliary fee increases. I have a question also about the participants at the table. Again, the students and we on this side of the House fought hard to include students in the MOU negotiations, and by and large they were successful. And I'm wondering whether or not in the next round staff and faculty could be included as well, because there is a concern that the MOU doesn't really say much about research and innovation and teaching, and that is a result of the fact that there really were no faculty members or faculty representatives at the table.
Order, please. The time for the honourable member from Halifax Citadel has expired. I now recognize from the Liberal Party the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and the minister made one comment early about she was prepared to do battle for university students, and I guess there's lots of battles on the P2K front yet. Yesterday, I started off with one of the areas that I guess has become a special interest part of mine, a little bit of an outgrowth of my time in a rural school, perhaps in particular, and around special education in that area. I wanted to reference a special education student and an incident that happened to a young man by the name of Lawrence Jackson. And Lawrence Jackson made the front page story of one of the last editions of the Daily News, which was January 25th, 2008. And I'm not so much going to go on the particular details, but I'll just give a little background on that and then have a bit of a larger question. But he was an autistic boy that was rescued by police in the middle of a 4-lane highway after evading the person in charge of him at a Dartmouth Junior High School, and I think it was John Martin Junior High, maybe, was the school, if I remember correctly. Yes, and he disappeared from that school on January the 11th. Halifax Regional School Board spokeswoman Sean McKinley said she would not confirm the identity of the student. But anyway, I had a conversation at that time with his mother, and she asked me if I were asked by the reporter, would I give some comment and statement about it, and which I said yes, I would, but I don't think perhaps either the NDP critic wasn't available, and so she didn't do either of us in terms of the story. But I have followed up with the mother, and I know that the Department of Education has responded by I guess providing more EPAs to the school so that her child doesn't have to be bundled, if you wish, which often happens, although we did have a designated EPA, educational assistant. When I first heard of it, and as I thought about this case, I guess what intrigued me a little bit, because the the story here, the EPA notified the principal and ran back to look for the student. The principal and a police officer who was in the school at the time followed in a car. And I guess perhaps there may be a little bit of discrepancy around that interpretation of the events that did follow. However, what I'm more concerned about is that we have in our school, you know, now a whole range of children with very severe disabilities. And I know the minister is in fact very aware of that. You know, we have children who are severely mentally challenged, also those with some level on the autistic spectrum, physically disabled, and so forth. What I was concerned about first in this, I'm wondering if there is from the Department of Education a protocol when such a student is indeed missing from the school, because when as the story and as the mother confirmed with me, you know, this could have been an unfortunate situation. As the boy was, you know, on a 4-lane highway heading to towards the McKay Bridge. So I'm just wondering, you know, does the department have a policy that schools are using, or is it up to a school board or a school to put in place procedures when an incident like this happens?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, the safety of all of the students in all of our schools, all of the time, has to be a priority. And schools and school boards certainly have policies and procedures in place to make sure that they provide the greatest possible safety precautions and care for all of the students who are there. It's true that we have many students in our public school system now who do require additional support, supervision, and care. And the situation of which you speak is one example of students who just can't seem to be, can't function without that support and without that supervision. And so the challenge for teachers and for schools is to make sure that they can modify or adjust any of their procedures based on the individual needs of that child. And for some, that attention is greater. And there are some children, Mr. Chair, that really can't be left alone at all. So it is a board policy. It is an expectation that boards have policy in place. Schools have their own practices, but even down to the classroom level and to the individual student, there has to be flexibility in when and how that supervision is provided. And I would expect that when you have a student with the great needs that this particular boy has, that the school would have practices in place. Now, the people who are working with the students, whether it's the teacher or whether it's the assistant, certainly have to be aware of the individual student's needs and the potential that's there for them to perhaps disappear. And so the attention and the requirement for support and supervision varies, but it is a board policy. It's their responsibility to develop that. Implementation, of course, as you know, takes place at the school level, and it varies depending on the severity of the needs of the child.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Kingswest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Madam Minister, for that explanation and clarification. I guess perhaps what we need to be looking at here, and the other part of this question, is that and they did change some of the procedure within the school, which was very good to see in terms of responding to what could have become a much more challenging incident. But she went on to say, Mrs. Cornelius went on to say, that she doesn't blame the school or any particular person. She said the root of the incident is that there are not enough EPAs for the number of special needs children at the school. She said EPAs are expected to look after more students than they are assigned to. You know, that's an area that I feel in terms of the last number of years where the province has not kept pace with educational dollars for our P-12 system. We're seeing this concept more and more of our special needs students being bundled. And bundled here means you can have 2 or 3, both in the classroom and also outside the classroom to be looked after. And I'm just going to ask the minister here, just based on this one statistic in a recent meeting with the school board and the superintendent of HRSB. They have now identified for September 2008 50 autistic children that will be coming into the system. I'm wondering if the budget that has been given the HRSB is allowing for this one and perhaps now not unusual number that we're going to see earlier identified that will come into the system, just like you know, Lawrence Jackson and many others like him. Are we going to take a shortcut and put him in a bundled situation? Are you prepared, if the school board in its negotiations, probably continuing to some extent, give support to that kind of very extreme need?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to speak to the needs, we recognize there are many more children coming into our system with identified disabilities. And so we have to be constantly trying to make sure that we have teachers in place who understand the disability and the strategies to deal with them, that we have the dollars in the special education funding to provide support for those students, and it is ever increasing, there's no question. And so part of the funding formula does speak to special education, and a ratio, based on a ratio of population, boards get funding designed specifically targeted for special education. And out of that, the boards would look at where they need to put those dollars to help with the supports and the assistance and programming for students with special needs. You know, the fact that the Halifax board has already identified 50 new students coming in, again, I guess reinforces my earlier comment that we are receiving more and more students with special needs, and the challenges of how we provide for them in schools gets greater and greater. I would like to think that the Halifax board and all other boards would look at priorities and what's the best use of the dollars that they have, but I would also like them to make sure they take advantage of the opportunity to meet with our staff. We have, with respect to autism in particular, we have staff at the department, we have in-service training for teachers. We've done a lot of programs to help teachers better cope with. And I think once teachers understand and know how to cope with, they can better make better use or more efficient use of the dollars that are there. But as I've said before, Mr. Chair, boards can always come to the department, and they do, and they talk about the funding and the needs that they have, and is there a way that the gap can be closed. So I know the funding is going to that board. I know they're going to have to look at their priorities and how they can best meet the needs. And if there is, still a challenge for them, I expect that they will be, and I would invite them to come to the department and share that with us.
Thank you. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just one last, short look at this. It says, for example, that the EPA is now in immediate contact with the office through a walkie-talkie. The student is changing classes when there are fewer distractions. Walking ahead of the EPA in the hallway is no longer permitted because the school has some unique curved hallways which limit the sight lines and so forth of a teacher or an EPA looking after the students. So they've made some provisions. But when we hear, of corrective measures here, which I believe will be very, very satisfactory, is the minister, prepared to take a look at just on a policy level, recommendations to boards in terms of creating, safer and more secure schools, because we now have students that perhaps when the minister and I and the speaker started our careers, we did not find in schools. That's just a reality today, and therefore perhaps some broad policy pieces, in fact, may be more effective than leaving it up to a board and for school interpretation.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm really pleased to hear that the school has been able to look at making some accommodations, changing practices, so that they feel more comfortable, the parents feel more comfortable that the boy, in this case, is well supervised. And it's true that I guess 3 of us in the room did start our careers a while ago, and that new challenges are there. And what we've done, with respect to autism, because again, that's something that actually was quite unheard of in the early years of our teaching, but certainly becomes very, very prominent now. And that is that we have looked at a 4-year program. We're going into the 3rd year of that 4-year program, where we have done some things, Mr. Chair, that I hope will help get the best practices out there into the schools, and so we can learn from the example that was shared here. We do have an autistic consultant hired at the department and an advisory team, and 11 demonstration sites, and those are around the province, but again, those are bringing teachers in. We've provided professional development, Mr. Chair, for about 150 teachers so far as we move through that approach, and making sure that they are aware of and understand and can respond to the needs of autistic children. And so as that awareness and that professional development and that sharing of best practices continues, we would like to think that the number of incidents like this one get reduced because one is one too many. But again, I guess our focus is right now on professional development and giving teachers the information and the tools that they need, and the assistants who are working with these students. And we know that Department of Health has invested a lot of, I think, $4 million into early detection, early intervention, and we have to get a handle on this particular disability. And we have to make sure that we have the professionals who understand the disability giving us some direction as to how we can best cope with it. That's the progress that we're making. That's where we're headed now. But we will continue to look at how we can improve on that delivery.
Thank you. The Honourable the Member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And unfortunately, I did leave 3 of my colleagues out here that at least started careers in the classroom. The member for Timberley Prospect, sorry to disturb him, and of course the member from Truro Bible Hill, and the deputy minister himself, I think, had that wonderful time in a classroom, at least in New Brunswick. I don't know if Nova Scotia were the case or not. But the area that I would like to take a look at, and that is the cancellation of pre-primary and early childhood education. There is no question that the 2 years that were first given for the pilot project was very quickly moved to 3 years because it was a program that, in my view, I would think was very, very difficult for the Minister in the Department of Education to drop. At the 19 sites, it had received very, not just strong, but impressive reviews of what this program was accomplishing in terms of readiness for primary, in detection of childhood disabilities, and also early interventions, which we know are so critical to a child's future in school. So I'm wondering if the minister and the department, I know, having evaluated the program, and I know it was moved aside because of picking up 2,100 more students for primary this year. But is that evaluation and the good work that was done going to be incorporated into some kind of perhaps a future initiative? Also, the curriculum that was put in place, in talking to a couple of the early childhood educators, is there some way of capturing all of the good results that we were able, and of course the department were able to gather in, and I guess a little bit of a look at the future here, Mr. Speaker?
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I answer your question, I'd just like to follow up on your comment about 3 of our other colleagues who are involved in education. I'd just like to remind the House that it's probably a different generation, but at least they did have some experience when we came on. I do want to go back to your question. Say that.
Don't forget the Premier.
You know, the pre-primary program was an excellent program, and it was a pilot for 3 years. And during the course of that 3 years, we recognized its value. Early intervention in catching these young learners at an early age. And we learned a lot from that program, Mr. Chair. One of the things we learned was that the curriculum that we had developed was appropriate for that age group. And the environment in which we delivered that curriculum allowed for a play model of learning, which certainly was effective. A couple of challenges with that, and you know, it was 19 sites. The participation in those pre-primary classes, Mr. Chair, was voluntary. It was transportation, the responsibility of the parent. And so right from the get-go, you were not providing equal opportunity for all students in the province, or all 4-year-olds in the province. And so when we looked at that, we looked at the value of it. We wanted to make sure that we were able to capture that value so that every 4-year-old in this province could take advantage of that. And one of the ways to do that was to change the age of entry date and capture at least 3 months of those students to come into primary early, and to make sure that the good things in that curriculum that we had piloted and found to be effective were incorporated into the primary program. So to do that, we had a consultant at the department who was there for the 3 years and who was instrumental in leading that pre-primary initiative, has been kept on because we value the leadership that she provided, and we want to make sure she's there as a resource and a support when we take that curriculum and enhance the primary program with that. So by making the change, we have given the opportunity to all students across the province who wish to be early learners coming into primary at an earlier age. That opportunity is there. Some parents will take advantage of that and some will not, but we've been fair in that the opportunity has been provided for every student in the province. And of course, that because they're in our public schools and the transportation and all of those things are our responsibility. The other thing that we're doing is we're hearing from many communities to say, this was a great program, we don't want to lose it. And so what we've said, and it may be, in cooperation with community services, it may be individually not-for-profit groups who we are encouraging to say, if you want to deliver that program, in fact, we believe that that's going to be delivered in some of the schools and some of the current sites that we have. So we welcome that opportunity, but we wanted to make sure that what we had, which was a good thing, was made available to all students in the province. And so we incorporated the curriculum into our primary. As I said, we've kept on the consultant. We've started in-servicing our teachers, our primary teachers, so they're familiar with this. And we are expecting, we could have about 2,200 students who will not be 5 until the end of December, who may take advantage of that. And so we're ready to receive those young learners.
Thank you. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. And I guess as the pre-primary has been dropped, the 4+ program here in HRSB hasn't had a final determination as to whether it will go forward. In speaking with the board, it is something that they strongly desire to keep going. And we all know that the investment now in early learning and one of the, of course, strong proponents and, of course, experts in the field, Dr. Fraser Mustard, has talked about, the investment in the early years. There is a $6 to $7 gain for every dollar invested. So it is a bit surprising that so much was learned firsthand by the department by venturing into early learning with the four-year-olds and establish some early childhood education in the province. That while we know good things have been happening both in the private and subsidized daycare systems. Just to finish off on this topic, I'm wondering if the department had given any consideration to having the pre-primary delivered through a daycare concept.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the member. I know that the member is very knowledgeable about early childhood and early learning, and we've talked many times about the value of that structure for early learners. And we had to make a choice, and if we expanded pre-primary to all across the province, we would have challenges with transportation. We would have challenges with who's providing the instruction in the classroom. Is it an early childhood educator or is it a teacher? And we wanted to make sure that, as I said, we took the best of the curriculum and captured part of that 4-year-old population. I would encourage any not-for-profit group. I would work with my colleague in community services and make sure that if there's an interest in a community, that we, through the schools, can certainly, where possible, provide facilities so that can happen. And as I said, I know that it is in a number, and I know that in Halifax Board, they're looking at transition from their 4+. So it's ongoing. This was the first major step. I guess the first step was the pilot, the second was the change of entry date, and the third will be how many opportunities and sites around the province can we look at that will be delivering some form of a pre-primary program.
Thank you. The honourable member from Kings West.
Madam Minister, and I'm sure it'll be an area, early childhood education is not going off the radar, and it will be one in one form or another that I'm sure perhaps all of the MLAs here, and in particular the education critics,